Really thrilled to welcome Marta Tellado, who is the president and CEO of Consumer Reports. So let's give a round of applause to Marta. You have the benefit of also being our wonderful host for this Responsible Tech Mixer. But I wanted to just give us a little baseline for our conversation today, Marta, to kind of say, all right, well, your role as the president and CEO of Consumer Reports, for like a baseline understanding for everyone here, what does that job entail? What does your role entail? Like walk us through a day in the life.
So you're Marta. Like my dad, and you're asking me, like, Marta, what do you do when you go to work every day?
You know, so I saw it on LinkedIn. And Marta, what do you do? Explain your job.
Well, first, let me just welcome.
You print the magazine?
Yeah. First, let me just welcome all of you to our wonderful collab space. And this is where our teams come together to work together, to have retreats, to think up new ideas. And I think you're one of the first groups that we're hosting. Amira, you keep me honest. And I can't be more excited, given your mission, what you care about, and how much that we appreciate that you are in this work and in this space. So, David, you want to know what I do every day. Well, I have the immense privilege of also working in a nonprofit and getting to lead that. But we have about, just short of maybe 560 employees. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of folks don't know that we are a nonprofit, but that 90% of our revenue is earned. Oh. Okay, so I do knock on philanthropic doors, but they only give me about this much relative to the incredible pie that we have. So that impacts my job. That's why I'm winding up to the what do I do? And so, you know, what a lot of CEOs focus on is really charting the organizational strategy and policies that is going to give folks the direction and the focus they need forward. And of course, I spend a lot of time building the board of directors, right? The governance of the organization. I will say that one of the things that got me most excited about coming to Consumer Reports, and some of you might think that it sounds like I'm a glutton for punishment, but it is a legacy organization that was at a pivotal moment in its history where it needed to become more relevant in the digital space. And because what we believe in cannot be more relevant right now in terms of responsible tech, fair tech, safe, open, secure. So when I came on board, it was also about not just building the organization, but building the board of directors, which is a CEO spends a lot of time because that they steward the organization even after I'm gone. That's their mission. They stick around for about 3 or 4 terms. So making sure that they get the issues and they can steward us into the future is what I do. And then, I focus a lot on resources because my job is to make sure that my teams have the tools and the resources they need to succeed and to implement the strategy. And that pretty much covers every day, all the time.
I will relay this to your dad. He will be happy. Now he understands, Marta, what you do.
He likes it in pictures.
Yeah. We'll give him pictures. I'll make it into GIF format. Everyone will be happy. But you mentioned kind of Consumer Reports being a pivotal juncture. A lot of companies struggle with this. I was just reading an article about Nurse Mayer, where some of the issues when they were trying to kind of revitalize the prominence of Yahoo and how that didn't necessarily work out. And then you have like companies like Radio Shack that tried to go to the Shack, and that didn't really work out. Was this something where Consumer Reports ever thought of like changing its name? Because that's what I've always been. No, but seriously, I mean, you could do Meta Reports or something. But especially since you were talking about like such valuable work that you do in this kind of space now that we're in, right, of responsible tech and understanding kind of this consumer power and just the overall awareness and directly tied in with your book that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I'm just kind of curious of like, how do you meet that struggle, which is kind of our next question together is, given the prominence of Consumer Reports as a magazine early on, right? Like a lot of times visually, that's how somebody might think of it. How did you go through this transition, or maybe it's still happening, right? Of like saying, no, here's why Consumer Reports is necessary in the 21st century. Here's our value. Here's what we do. Like, how do you change that perception?
Well, perceptions change very slowly. I mean, you could have the best darn strategy in the universe, but as you know, what people believe they take with them, and you can't change minds. What you can do is set a course and figure out how to measure that needle over time. And so, to your point, when you're doing work like this, everybody has advice for you. And the most common advice was, change the name. Yeah, change the name because, that just doesn't sound right anymore. And consumers, that's a bad word. And I thought long and hard about it. But, we spent 86 years building the reputation of an organization that people trust, and that we have to imbue that name with new meaning. So, and that doesn't mean we're changing our mission. I think one of the magical things about CRs, our mission is that our job is to create a fair and safe marketplace for all. That's unchanged, but everything in the world and in our marketplace has changed. So the strategy has to change, and how we meet the goals and objectives of what we do have to change. And to me, that sounded like a really exciting proposition. Like, how do you retool for the future? How do you retool for sustainability? And one of the biggest hurdles that you mentioned is people think of us as a magazine. Like, that's just what they think about. I can have a bazillion pages on our site and so much information, and yet people think, and so I always say, people think that we were a magazine with a mission, but we are a mission that happens to have a magazine, an investigative reporting team, a team of advocates, mobilizers are working in the community, investigators, testers, scientists. We've got the whole gamut. So the job is really to tell a more fulsome story about who we are, and we'll talk about this a little later, develop new tools that people need on the front lines of a very dynamic and rapidly changing digital landscape.
Prepping for today's discussion, I was watching a lot of interviews with you on YouTube.
I feel for you.
No, I think I watched one with Fox Business News and a bunch of other
ones.
You
must have other things to do with your time, David.
This is important. You gotta nail it. Gotta prep. I gotta put in the 10,000 hours. So with that, one of the things that I always saw you comment about is really just like the power difference that's happened in the marketplace with social media companies. So you mentioned kind of the importance of thinking, consumer reports, consumers in the name. One of the struggles that we deal a lot with at All Tech is Human is like shifting away from viewing ourselves as like a user online or on a platform. Like, how do you think of yourself or other people? Do you think of them as users? Are they consumers? Are they creators? Because I know in one of your ones you were kind of hinting at Section 230, talking about the user-generated content and the liability kind of waiver that happens with Section 230. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I can tell you how I think about it, but it always depends on who you talk to. You talk to a marketer, they're talking about customers. You talk about, people on the front line of advocating for what is just, and they are talking about people power. So I do think of more human-centered. I think of a person. I think of people. I think of, putting people first by design. How do you do that? What do you do? And so to me, the word consumer, what we have to imbue it with is power, right? When you think about a marketplace, you think about supply and demand. Right now, we have over-rotated on the supply side. They are driving, they are structuring, they are designing, they are handing things to us and saying, well, this is pretty much the only way to do this. And we have to recognize that we, as part of that marketplace, have to demand more justice, more fairness by design, and that it doesn't have to be this way. That's going to take some work.
Yeah.
But that's how I see it. I see it as a marketplace is about balance. It's about tension. It's about give and take. They need us, right? Remember, we have the power to consume things. They're trying to sell us. How do we shape the market? And over the course of our history, We have seen, this isn't the first time we've been here. We have seen that happen. We know that can happen. We have seen it happen with toxic chemicals and pollution when we have said we don't want a society like this. We are going to do something about it. And you've got to start changing so that we will come along. We're at a point right now where we need to sit up, not be complacent about what we've been handed, and then come together with a much larger coalition of forces to say, it's time for a change, and your business is going to rely on us, so you need to come along for that.
Well, that's what I was really struck with your book, Buyer Aware, that we're going to talk about. But so much of its focused, at least for my perception in reading it, was around consumer power. But one of the issues, because I deal a lot with kind of the trust and safety side and social media, and sometimes we focus on the individual and they say, all right, hashtag, like at the time, it's like delete Facebook. And then people say, well, wait a minute, even if you delete it, that doesn't really matter. And 98% of the revenue comes from marketers. Let's focus on the marketing side. So they said, stop hate for profit, the ADL and other groups were behind. So I'm just kind of curious of like, how does the consumer, how do they work in tandem with other parts of the structure? So for example, the United States doesn't have a national data privacy kind of law that would say limit that. Like so many issues around social media, at least in my opinion, tend to be related to the power of data or just the value of data, which is kind of like, why do you rob a bank? Because that's where the money is. Why do people exploit data? Because that's where the money is, right? So having that safeguard, like what does the consumer do to kind of move that process forward? If it's not always their singular action as an individual consumer, it oftentimes is tied in with the political process.
Well, I break it up into sort of three levels. And I think of the first level being just awareness, that is our responsibility, right? Because we're part of a democracy. A democracy only thrives if you're engaged, if you're aware, if you're informed. You have to play an active role. But that's not enough. So what are we trying to do with that awareness? What are we trying to change? And you have to meet people where they are. People have families. They're trying to do something every day. They're trying to feed their family, drive somewhere, go somewhere, take care of an elderly parent. Mm-hmm. Everything you think about in your life, every aspiration, you go to the marketplace to fulfill that aspiration. You go to the marketplace to get a student loan, to have a bridge to your future, to get a mortgage, to get insurance, all these things. That market has to work for us if we're going to realize our aspirations. So the next step really is, how do you help people with those individual choices, right? We know the market is like an obstacle course, that there's fine print, that you can make wrong turns that cost you dearly. So you help them with that. But that's not enough. Mm-hmm. So you go to the next level, and the next level is systemic change. And that's what we all want. That's harder to do. But there are no shortcuts. You don't get systemic change without awareness and without demonstrating to the individual that you have tools that can help them in their daily lives, right? I don't think you can take a beeline to, we're going to rock the boat, because it's like, wait a minute, how does that help me? You have to meet them where they are, but then you'd bring them along. And I think for us, as part of a consumer movement, is that for many years, I think we were very siloed, right? We saw ourselves as being in this track. And I think there's a track that works on consumer issues, human rights issues, civil rights issues, women's issues. And what I argue in the book is that all those issues are civil rights issues, that we can't have a thriving democracy if we don't have economic opportunity in the marketplace. And that to me is fundamental. And so I want to break down the barriers between us, because it is going to take all of us to create that marketplace that all of us aspire to, that puts people first.
Do you think there's going to be a pushback in the marketplace for individuals who really are the ones generating content? If you think about social media, right, it's based on extracting the value of user-generated content and then creating laws that allow for that to happen without the legal liability. So, early on with the web in the 90s, one of the original ideas was to have that kind of micropayment system, which is now people are starting to kind of shift that over into kind of blockchain technology. But Are you optimistic that individuals who really haven't reaped the rewards of their content, right, are going to be more kind of forward about that? Like, do you think that are you optimistic that, let's say myself as an individual, people always try to say, well, how much is each person worth, right? But we've really struggled to kind of take value in that for each individual.
Well, one can't do what we all do without being optimists.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody who's a pessimist in here, if you raise your hand, I just won't believe it, honestly, because what we're all trying to do is so hard that we are always looking for the thing we can't see because we believe it's possible. And our job is to make sure many more people than us believe it's possible and can be a part of what we're trying to create. Because there are forces much larger than us that are able to write that story and write it very effectively, so that it blinds you to what's possible, right? And so I think we have to be optimistic. I think the forces that you're putting your finger on, the platforms, that opens the door to some really important structural things. And that is that in this corporate overreach and writing of the way we live in our society, what we have lost is that the technology has advanced so quickly and so rapidly that we have not kept pace with the oversight, with the humanistic qualities and values that we want that technology to lift up as opposed to push down. And so we're playing catch up. Yeah. And that is a huge issue that, to me, it's like a 5-alarm fire, because technology is not going to wait for us to get our act together to write that law or to pass that legislation. And so what I appreciate about Consumer Reports, that given our size and scale, when you have inaction, either in a legislative, in a political sphere, you have to press other levers, right, to push and move the marketplace. And what I mean by that is markets respond, right? Remember, they're out to do and to sell and to provide. And when you incentivize the market in a positive way, it comes right back and says, "Oh, wait a minute. Why do you think we have some of the products in our stores that we have right now? Why is it so much easier to find organic now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago? Now we get the price down. That's the next battle. But you can move a market. So I'll give you just one example. And I'll give you, people often ask me, oh, well, what, Consumer Reports, my gosh, you must walk into a hearing and everybody pays attention because you have 6 million members and $240 million in revenue every year that you pour back into the organization. And I say it is, when we speak with authority and facts and science. But what I've also seen is when I walk into a room of a family that's been impacted by a problem in the marketplace and they get past their tragedy because they want to see systemic change and they organize other families to be at that hearing to make that change happen, that's overwhelming. And to me, I think that is what pushes us and never lets us forget that this is about people.
Yeah.
This is all about people. Do not get distracted. The platforms, let's face it, we live in a monopoly environment right now where the way we're communicating and what we're doing and selling and teaching our kids is dominated by a value system that is just monetizing the way we engage with those tools. And so that is something no one organization is going to be able to do. But I will tell you, one of the things we do is we do an enormous amount of survey work with consumers. And what's promising, this is the other source of optimism, is that what we're seeing is that right now, folks are kind of fed up. They want to see more action from the federal government to protect them. They don't trust the big tech companies. That's new in the last 3 years. So I think there's a moment happening here.
Oh, certainly a moment. I know, there was a article not too long ago where it showed how Wired magazine, they've changed their covers of tech founders, and they had one of Zuckerberg where it was kind of like almost like a saint, and then later on he was bruised, right? So they've gone through that, and then the levers of power that you're discussing, really kind of, I don't know, I guess happy, for lack of a better word, to see the $1 billion fine of Alex Jones around kind of the terrible misinformation around Sandy Hook, right? So
Accountability.
accountability. But that was another lever, right? Whereas they weren't able, to your point, like misinformation early on was spreading Alex Jones on YouTube until advertisers really got into brand safety. And then all of a sudden, Alex Jones goes away from YouTube, right? So now you're seeing a slap of a huge fine for that. But one of the other areas that I was really focused on with your book, Buyer Aware, kind of looking at some of, even just with the subtitle of Harnessing Our Consumer Power for a Safe, Fair, and Transparent Marketplace. We talked a little bit about your kind of vision for a better, more transparent marketplace. The other part, you had a chapter kind of talking about financial fairness, and you were discussing how there's this movement now around kind of like more ethics and ESG kind of goals. Are you optimistic about that? I mean, how do you take something that's really kind of trendy right now, like responsible AI and tech ethics, and to make sure, because there's always a lot of concern around ethics washing, So are you optimistic that this is leading to true change in the business world?
The reason I'm optimistic is because I think that's happening because people are demanding it, because we have generations and cohorts of a population that are saying, I'm watching you, I'm not believing, show me. Show me that you're responsible. Show me that there's a human side to your company. And so companies are very smart and strategic. And so you start to see the ESG funds. I think that's positive. I think we're seeing a lot more on the, ESG being environment, social, and governance, on the environmental and the governance. I think we're still trying to figure out how you measure the social progress in those funds. I think that's a little weak. I think we're seeing a lot of B Corps, and we've seen that tripled. So I think the scale of the problem, however, is so great that that's not a panacea. Mm-hmm. I think it's something we need to do as a society. I don't think it's the thing that is going to solve what we need to do. Okay. But I think it's driven by people who are saying that's not what's going to drive me to your product.
Well, let's continue the conversation about people. Near the end of your book, Buyer Aware, you talk around kind of this like civic tech and public interest technology kind of movement. So where are we? Because, in my space, I deal a lot with public interest technology and trying to kind of increase that in the field. A lot of funders really interested in it. Where do you think we are in this movement? Well, are we still nascent? Are we peak?
I'll tell you
a
a personal story. So before I came to the wonderful Consumer Reports, I was at the Ford Foundation just around the corner, and I was there for 10 years. And so you see a lot of change in 10 years, and there was a lot of change in the marketplace. And one of the things that was changing so quickly is that the Ford Foundation is a big gorilla and has a lot of money to give away. And we didn't do a whole lot around technology, and we didn't do a whole lot around how technology is really impacting every grant-making area. Like now we talk about it like it was always the case, like human rights. Yeah. We get it, not the case. And we pushed so hard there was one program officer, and maybe you all know Jenny Toomey, who's an amazing leader in the field. And she and I tried and cajoled and saw that just in my time there. I finally, when I left, now there's a team. Mm-hmm. Now, is it as nascent as it was 5 years ago? No. Is it still, we're still needing to turn that piece around. I'll give you an example about why I feel it's still nascent. We talked about how our government rules and standards and regulations are not keeping pace with technology. Well, why do you think that is? How many technologists wake up in the morning and say, I want to work in public service. I want to go to work for the Department of Education. We need to see more of that. That needs to be a passion. We need to embrace it. We need to say that, yes, this is like a moonshot. You guys get to go and create tools that really support people in their lives. I've seen programs that allow people to access resources, governmental resources that will advance their lives remarkably through the power of tech. I mean, we love tech. We know the power of it. We've seen how life-changing and life-saving it could be in a space that we know a lot about, cars. But, that's another area where all that life-saving technology is not mandatory in every car. We're fighting to make it standard, right? So I think I want to say that the technology continues to outpace us. We've got to do double time. I don't think the average person on the street understands what civic tech is. I explain it a lot. I don't think they understand what that is. I think responsible AI is something else that's picking up steam. I'm really excited about that. That is another 3-alarm fire because algorithms are permeating everything we touch and do. I think this movement is incredibly important. I think this is our moment. And for us to be able to join, and that's what that last chapter is about, we've got to see the connections and we've got to make the connections for the scale of change that we need to see. So I think we're a little further along than we were, but in this room, we have to look outward, not ask ourselves how far are we along, but how far is what we're trying to change along. And we still have a road to climb there.
Okay.
But there are more of us.
There are a lot more of us.
There are more of us.
Yes.
And we're in this room, and I'm really proud that you're all here under the CR roof. That, to me, is real progress.
So for our final question, Marta, one of the topics we always like to discuss with everyone with All Tech is Human lately is your vision of a better tech future and what we need to do today to achieve that. Because the reason why we asked that is we've noticed, we started All Tech is Human in 2018. Everyone seems to kind of have a different vision. And I think, well, no wonder we're all upset at each other. No wonder we're not happy with which way we're going because we haven't had a shared consensus, right? And that's how majoritarian type of government would work to say okay, everything deals with a trade-off. What's a better vision? Do we have a roadmap? So then we can start driving. To stay with that kind of analogy, we can drive somewhere. Whereas right now, I've seen it with privacy advocates versus people who are going after child sexual abuse materials. They're at loggerheads because they deal with different trade-offs around privacy and freedom, right? So what's your vision, Marta, for a better tech future?
I'll just say ahead of time, I don't know that my vision is going to solve that immense problem that you just described, which is there's many of us.
But you're not alone. You got everyone. You're just a collective part of
But I will
the
tell you
puzzle.
that the question is not as intimidating as the one I got on a podcast the other night where they closed the interview and here's the question we ask everyone. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm ready. And they said, so what's a life-changing movie that you saw? And I was stumped. So I won't tell you what I said. Unless you ask. But well, it's so corny. My brand will suffer when I tell you.
So Home Alone 2 Lost in New York?
But what I said was when I was 2 years old, I moved to the U.S. from Cuba after a revolution where my parents were immensely disappointed that it went from what they felt was going to be a moment of equity to a moment of surveillance and authoritarianism. And the first movie I went to as a child in the middle of a snowstorm was The Sound of Music. And there was a little girl in the movie named Marta. And every little girl that I'd met was named Martha. And my kindergarten teacher was insisting I put an H in my name. And then when I saw Sound of Music, I said, she's wrong. I'm right. I will continue to be a Marta. But more importantly, at the end of the movie, I noticed that my parents, they had a little tear in their eye. And So as a kid, I was like, well, this is a happy movie. They escaped the bad guys. And they said, well, it's a story about us. It's a story about how we had to leave. And what you understand is that people never really quite get over that emotional loss. And it was very instructive to me. And it also lit the fire around openness, transparency, trust, justice, fairness. It's ephemeral. If you don't pour yourself into it, you're not contributing to the thing that we value and cherish most. So the vision that I have is always based on that foundation, that passion of what we have and our role in continuing to nurture it. But when I think about the vision, when I think about the fact that we need rules that are fair, incentives that are positive and not perverse, ways of holding people in power accountable. And we want that because we want to see a world where we have, we can enforce what we have privacy by design. We have, we have a community that we have policies that work for every community by design. We have privacy by design. It's not a setting, right? It's something that you carry with you. And where you have people at the center of decisions by design, not an afterthought. I think if we can lose the complexity and remember that the power of what you all do as innovators and the people who think about designing what you do every day, married with the power of consumers and in the marketplace who can demand the way you're designing a more humanistic future, I think we'll be unstoppable. But we have to create those bridges and we have to commit to them in ways that will be disappointing at times, but that's where that you pour a little more of that optimism in there. So to me, that is what I see when I see a world of folks like yourself that are innovating and designing. I think if we leave it to others, you know what it begets, and we're commodities now as a result.
Well, let's leave it to everyone here and the community outside. So, Marta, I want to thank you, and again, buyer aware. Let's give it up for Marta Tellado.
Thank you.
Thank you. And give it up for everyone.